Hello, and welcome to the second episode of the Pac-Mountain Pulse, a Mountain West Connection podcast. I'm your host, Derek Raridan, and with me today is not Dom. Sadly, he had some stuff going on in his life, but today I thankfully have the honor of sharing the screen with Jack Thompson, who is the host of the Hikes Peak podcast. See what I mean? How about you introduce yourself, my friend?
What's going on, guys? So, yeah, I'm Jack Thompson. I've been running the Hikes Peak podcast for the last 3 or 4 years now. Really excited to have another podcast on the team. As you know, I try to cover as many bases as I can, but one of the ones that I've definitely always kind of missed out on is the more conversational tone. So I'm really excited for the direction this podcast heading, and I'm really excited to be able to sit in for one of these.
I appreciate that, Jack. Thank you. I know I'm very stoked about this, and I know I've been wanting to DM you and be like, hey, like if you ever have a Nevada thing, let us know. We'll hop on. But then it's like it just never worked out. So, but yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I appreciate you, my friend. Thank you.
No worries. I'm sure we'll
Um,
have Nevada specific segments at some point. I'll grab you for.
Jeff chose doing a bowl game this year. Don't worry. No. Um, but no. Okay. So last week we covered a lot of the Mountain West because they had their Media Days event, which Jack did go to. We appreciate
Mhm.
that, my friend. I know he has a bunch of. I keep on hitting the microphone. He has a bunch of different interviews and everything from that event. I think it was like 2 or 3 days, wasn't it?
Yeah, 2 days.
2 days. So go check out his content over there. He'll be posting them all throughout. I think is it a mega episode or is it just like sporadic stuff?
So on my YouTube, you can find all the full length interviews. Right now, all the player interviews we have are all up there. Like they're broken up by team. So like I have, all the players I interviewed from each specific team kind of in each video. And then we just dropped our first kind of player specific episode, kind of just going through the best quote from each team from the players. And then the coaches interviews are going to go up on the YouTube this week. We'll dive into those a little bit on the pod after that. And then we got one more interview for the week after with Mountain West Commissioner Gloria Navarez. So that's always going to be really exciting to hear.
I'm super jealous that you got to interview her. That's super dope.
It was pretty
That's
cool.
I'm, so, I'm
I was
so
definitely
excited.
kind of starstruck.
I believe it. I'm the same way. So, but on that note, since we covered a lot of Mountain West stuff last week, we will be talking about a lot of Pac-12 stuff this week. The big three topics, kind of starting from top to bottom, is the emergence of the national brand of Brad Jackson, who is the Texas State quarterback, who is projected to be the best Group of Six quarterback in the entire nation. We'll get into talking about him and what Texas State should do. Then afterwards, we'll get into we have an article from Dan Allison talking about the over/under win totals from FanDuel. We'll get into our opinions about that. And then lastly, a national conversation because realignment's always going to happen about some Pac-12 schools leaving potentially in like 2030, 2031 for other bigger conferences such as the Big 12. But let's jump right into it, starting with Brad Jackson. Quite simply put, he's a dog. He is a dual
Yeah.
threat machine. Last year alone, he accounted for, I think it was just over, yeah, I'm looking at the screen right now, about 4,100 total yards, 3,200 in the air, about 750 on the ground. He had 17 rushing touchdowns to 21 and 21 passing touchdowns to just 7 interceptions. I want to say it's a ratio of dang near like somewhere into like the 6.1 to 7.1 range.
It's very
But he
good.
was just an absolute, yeah, 100%. He was an amazing Sun Belt quarterback, and he will be joining his team, Texas State, in the Pac-12 this year. And my big question for this is how much of an impact will Brad Jackson have going into this year, and how much will that affect Texas State's performance overall?
I'm definitely very high on Brad Jackson. I think a lot of people that have kind of looked into him have that same kind of sentiment because, it's not every day you see a quarterback leading a conference in rushing touchdowns. It just doesn't happen unless you're from a school like Air Force or something. But, Brad Jackson did that while still being a very competent and solid quarterback for Texas State as a redshirt freshman. This is a guy that proved he was very capable and a very talented player. And with a bigger stage in front of him. He has his two best receivers coming back as well in Bo Sparks and Chris Don Jr., both coming off of 1,000 yards, both coming off of 1,000 yard seasons. Like the Bobcats, I've been saying for a while, are one of, if not the most overlooked team in the Pac 12. just because I know it's not the biggest brand and it's not like they've done anything major like on the level of like a James Madison or any of those group of five schools that's really gotten on to a national level. But GJ Kinney has been building an offensive juggernaut there for the last couple of years, and the defense is just kind of taking a little bit to catch up. But Brad Jackson's the engine of this offense, and he's the engine of this team for sure. And they're only going to go as far as he can take them.
And in my eyes, it makes it very hard to scheme against Texas State. It's like because there's so much he can do on the field. He can dominate you in the air. He averaged like I think it was 250 or just below 250 passing yards a game on really good percentages. If I remember correctly, let me look at the sheet just to make sure. It was seven. I think it was 71% from what I'm seeing right here,
Mm-hmm.
which is insane to think about because most of the time we're talking about someone who's in like the 62 to 68 range as a
Mm-hmm.
really good quarterback,
Yeah.
and he's doing this at such a high octane level. And then there's the running game, which, like you alluded to, it's like he's playing on the Air Force scheme, but also
Mm-hmm.
able to throw the ball like no other, and it's insane to think about. And I do agree. I think realistically speaking, coming into this season, the three favorites for me for a Pac-12 conference championship is Boise, Texas State, and San Diego State. Obviously, we still have to kind of figure out how they're going to do, how the rosters turnover will it really affect them in the first couple games of the season.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, I don't think many people are given the respect to Texas State that they deserve, and it will shock a lot of people down the line when they're like, "Wait a minute, how is Texas State, this team from the Sun Belt, coming over and dang near taking the first year of the new Pac-12 all down and going in towards a tournament game or not a tournament, a championship game?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they're
And
they're
so,
definitely. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say
sorry,
they're
no, go ahead.
definitely. I was just going to say that like there definitely is a reality where maybe this team stumbles a bit in their first year, and that would kind of suck considering how many seniors are on this really explosive offense that they've kind of built it around. Giving Brad Jackson as many tools as he can for this 2026 season, but at the same time, like regardless of what conference they played in, there's numbers don't lie. Like it's very hard to find another quarterback that has been as consistent of a dual threat as Brad Jackson, and he did it as only a freshman. So there's very good reason to believe that he's only going to get better from here, which is a pretty scary thought. With what he put forth already.
It makes it really hard in my eyes to know that he came back to Texas State because it's always tricky with the current situation of like transfer portal, NIL, all that kind of stuff and everything, where it's, hey, you have a breakout year. And we saw this routinely throughout the group of six. Um, Again, they think like James Madison, like you were talking about earlier. Obviously, they had coaching changes and everything as well. So can't just blame the fact that they were doing good and had a national spotlight on them. But so many players transferred, some
Mm,
of them finding their home in a Power Four conference. And so now it's like, okay, do as well as you can this year, like you said, with the weapons you have at the senior level. So that
mm,
way, push comes to shove, Texas State has a really good recruiting class or a really good transfer class that
mm,
brings another talent. And then Brad Jackson just goes and says, hey, you know what? They've treated me well. I'm going to treat them well. And if that can
mm,
be the case, I don't see how Texas State doesn't contend in multiple different categories, whether that be in player awards, whether it be in coaching awards, whether it be in overall just national success. Like we
mm.
might see them. This might be the pivotal point where they, with Brad Jackson, gain a national recognition from there, and then take off and start getting recruits, and that truly does rebuild the Pac-12 to where they want to go in like a couple years.
Yeah, it's definitely been a very fast resurgence, or it's just been a very fast surge up the collegiate ranks for Texas State. They started the program early in the 21st century, I believe it was somewhere in the 2000s. And since then, they've gone straight to, they were not that great of a program for the first decade and a half. And then GJ Kinney came in, took them to their first bowl game. They throw the goalpost in the river and they have that great moment. And then it kind of just snowballs from there. And even though the win totals haven't been anything ecstatic at this point, it hasn't gotten above 8 wins, I believe. There's there's been an undeniable amount of culture built from when Kenny has taken over, and it really seems like there's so much foundation laid for this Bobcats team and program that if the pieces can come together, they can get a couple things to fall their way this year. This could definitely be a very pivotal year for them as they try to, kind of stake their claim in this new tier of college football that they find themselves in.
I think even then, like having only a 6.5 over under, which we'll get into the rest of the conference here in a few minutes, but just having that recognition, like, hey, you're expected 6 wins. Don't worry about it. I like you were saying, I see a reality. I'm not saying like double digit wins, but somewhere into the 8 to I would say 10. 10 would be their ceiling depending on how they build and how they do their stuff and everything. It obviously just depends on how the team glues again, how they do all their other stuff and everything. But it and we'll talk about it again like here in a moment, but about the win over under totals. But it's if you are betting against Texas State, unless you're someone like Boise or a marquee matchup on their non-conference schedule, then you are probably doubting them a bit too, or yeah, you're doubting his talents and the team's talents a bit too much in your prep, either as a fan, mentally getting prepared for the game, or a program in general. So it's going to be a very interesting year. I think, like Texas State, I always root for underdogs, and I really hope just because of their like national recognition, I hope that Texas State does well because, like you were saying, this could be pivotal and grow their program further. And then you just see facilities come along, you see donations come along, you see other programs benefiting from that too because their baseball team had 4 draft picks this year. So it's like there's other programs that get affected by that, and if they can do that well, the meme absolute cinema. You never know. You never know. So, but yeah, and so on that note, we got the win totals. FanDuel released them a while ago. Dan Allison talked about it in a article. Thank you, Dan, for doing that as well. Jack, I know you talked about this on your podcast as well, so please feel free to get a full breakdown from Jack over at Hikes Peak. He'll give you all that stuff and give you like an over under or accurate win total thing, and we'll go from there. But my question is on Pac-Mountain Pulse, which teams based on their win-loss total are gonna exceed expectation, and which programs do you think are going to be more underwhelming overall? And I'll kind of take over first if that's okay. I'll throw one.
Yeah, I'm just going through the list real quick. My bad.
It's all good. It's all good. Yeah, it's all fine. I would say most likely, and it does kind of impact it a little bit because of the flex game in the end of the season, which I think is a really cool idea. I like that idea a lot. I wish more conferences did that because that'd be a lot of fun. But with that being said, I think one program that probably doesn't get the love it deserves, realistically, I would probably say Utah State. I'd say Utah State. As much as, yes, they've been a really underwhelming program over the last couple of years, you kind of mark them on your schedule and go like, okay, we'll see what happens. They have a lot of good weapons. Their quarterback play got better. Excuse me. They beefed up their offensive line. They have other weapons that could develop overall, or if they glue the correct way, could be a really dominating force. And we saw that last year. Like Utah State, I believe they hosted Nevada last year, and they won like 55-10. So if you can take that blueprint that you had from those couple games where you did dominate or at least contend really well, I think, what is it, 3.5? No, 5.5. I truly do think that Utah State has the capabilities to be a bowl game contender this year. It's just a matter of how they kind of build from there, and I'm hopeful about them.
Yeah, they definitely have a lot riding on the quarterback spot. Last year Bryson Barnes was so much fun to watch for them over the last 2 years. Just a lot like Brad Jackson, kind of a guy that can throw pretty decently in the pocket, but is more of a bruising force as a runner. And he was, just a real treat to watch week in and week out. And they have a little bit of a different guy now in McKay Hillstead, of course, began his career at Utah State, goes to BYU for a couple of years, doesn't play much, comes back now to Logan and is now going to be their starting quarterback. And not as much of a runner. He's definitely a smaller guy than Bryson Barnes was. I think he's like 5'10", 5'11", 180, something in that range. But he's a lot more dynamic as a passer, which I definitely think could open some things up for this offense. They have a lot of talent in that wide receiver room. Anthony Garcia's back, who they moved over from quarterback. He had a really, really good year last year. And with him only being in his first year as a wide receiver, kind of like we saw with Nick Nash a couple of years ago, sometimes these converted quarterbacks really have breakout years after you thought you've already seen their ceiling been hit. So I definitely think Utah State can get over that 5.5 win hump. I think a lot of this is relying on Hillstead being the answer at quarterback, because if he's not, let me look. I want to say their only other yeah, that's right. So if Hillstead doesn't work out, they got 2 other freshmen on the roster, and their main backup's going to be Grady Brosterhouse, who's a transfer coming in from Virginia. He's a veteran, but he's really more of a running kind of guy. So that kind of seems like more of the replacement for what Bryson Barnes' running aspect of the offense was, rather than like a true backup. So just if in the event that Hillstead gets hurt, kind of like he did in his freshman year with BYU, or in his freshman year with Utah State, or he just struggles and you want to try something else. If you're Bronco Mendenhall, you just don't have a ton of options left on this team. So that's the only real concern I have. They have a lot of good depth across the board elsewhere. Offensive line looks solid. They got 2 of the best defensive tackles in the conference in Carson Tujagu and Tyree Morris, both very good players. You got other all-conference guys coming back in Bronson Oliveo and Brevin Hamblin. Like there's plenty of talent on this team. Just the quarterback spot leaves me a little bit weary and does kind of leave them open to a worst-case scenario where they would end up under 5.5.
No, I 100% get that, because I mean, again, I'm going to compare Utah State to Nevada because they were very just similar kind of situations that they're in right now. Is you have your guy, but your backup is either a freshman or someone who has been like a mix sort of stuff. And obviously Utah State's more the freshman side, less of like the freshman and someone else. But it's like if they can truly develop if this guy comes out with this development from BYU, gets everything going with the roster that he has around him, again, like we'll see 6 wins. I am curious if the pure runner archetype could work with them, just because again, like we see triple options obviously at Air Force and stuff, and we see other programs trying to do like wildcat options and other stuff and everything that can blend with that system.
And so they had Anthony Garcia throw the ball a ton.
No, exactly, yeah. So that's what I'm just saying. It's like we can see what happens from there. It's just a matter of what are you going to do to adapt, whether it be the old style or a new style. You know what I'm saying? So we'll see what happens. But do you have a favorite besides Utah State that could possibly branch out outside their predicted win total?
I think the big one sticking out to me is Colorado State, which I know like 3.5 just seems super low for how much. Like this is, you got to keep in mind, this is essentially UConn, Colorado State. It's half UConn from 2025, and like and some of these other guys on this team are former UConn transfers. Like Darrell Robinson's probably gonna be their best running back. He's an Auburn transfer, and you're like, oh, cool, he's from the SEC. No, he transferred to Auburn from UConn the year before. So but the thing is, like Jim Mora built a very successful program in Storrs, and they have a ton of talent following him that is really going to set them up well for success, that I feel like they're probably going to end up with 4 or 5 wins. They got one of the most underrated linebackers in the conference, and Umar Diamande had like 115 tackles last year for UConn. Comes back and should be one of, if not the most productive linebacker in the Pac-12. Kind of like with Colorado State, a lot riding on quarterback. They brought in House Haney from Oklahoma State, former 4-star, really dynamic dual threat that's got a cannon for an arm, just has not been able to stay healthy through his first 2 years. So even more so than with Hillstead, even more of a wild card with him being able to stay on the field. But if he can, the upside's probably even more than it is with McKay, just because Haney has that kind of pedigree as a prospect.
No, I understand that, because Mora, he had such a good resume coming in, and like you were kind of alluding to in like what Dan alluded to on the article, it's really easy to write off a team that's in the process of like year one rebuild, just because when you go 2-10, you lose your head coach, you lose a lot of people that you thought could be good. You don't know what's going to happen, and so yeah, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if we see the Rams going forward with it, because they're just like you were like saying, there's so much riding on it in my eyes, and I
Yeah.
think if they can at least beat the FanDuel total, they're in the right direction. Anything can be better than 2-10. Trust me, as someone who reps the blue, yeah, anything can be better than 2-10. So it's just, at the end of the day, it's, can Colorado State do it? And realistically, it's a matter of, I think the win total or the over under win total was just a public perception thing.
Mm.
I would say probably 5 wins is realistic. Obviously, we have to see how the team glues and how their schedule works. All their like tougher conference opponents are, or not all of them, but they have some tough ones at home. So at least you'll have the crowd with you and everything as well.
Mm.
And so it's a matter of just getting out those wins, whether they be squeaking them in the fourth quarter, building up a big lead in the first half, and then carrying it from there, or whatever may have you. Maybe a bounce back win, which I know would get Colorado State bumping for their fans, because their fans are very vocal, and I love that.
Mm.
So just it just depends on how they keep that momentum going, and if they can, you should bet on Colorado State 100% freaking. If they don't, you might want to. 4 wins is realistic if they're not. So regardless, I think an over bet is probably still going to be good. So
Yeah, the wheels definitely could fall off at a certain point, but like also you look at their beginning of the schedule, and it's especially compared to some of the other teams in the Pac-12, like they have a pretty light schedule. Like they started off with Wyoming, which obviously a rivalry game, the border war, super fun that that's going to be in week 1, but that's a toss up. That's a game that Colorado State can definitely win. Then against Southern Utah, FCS team that's not one of the premier programs, you'd hope they could win that. Then and home against BYU, probably not going to happen, but maybe they can be competitive. And then after that, it's UTSA and Oregon State, which are both two solid teams, two solid programs, but those are winnable. So there's a possibility that they could actually get over that win total in 5 games, which I'm not saying is going to happen because you would need a ton to go right, but it's not out of the question.
Oh, 100%. I will say, if they don't get at least close to that win total early on, like if they don't go, say, like 2-2 in non-conference or whatever may have you, I think that's going to be where it's really tricky. Because
it's going to have to happen early. You're right.
Exactly. Because you end the season at home Boise State on November 7th, which, hey, it's senior night. That's going to be a great night. But then you're on the road, Washington State, and then on the road, Fresno. And I'm not saying that those can't be toss-up games, but not having the crowd in a pivotal point in the season is never a good thing. And so, we'll just have to see how that goes. It'll be a fun season to watch the Rams, especially if this team does glue correctly. But, we'll just wait and see. We're like, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or 3 weeks away from the season, or at least fall camp and everything starting. So, should be a fun time to see how Colorado State does this year.
Yeah, we're almost there.
So, no kidding. And that's going to be a heck of a time for us, I'll tell you that. I guess one team that I kind of want to highlight for someone that could falter, under, obviously, like Boise State's obviously the highest team right now at, like, I think it's 8.5 wins. So realistically, if you're going over 9 wins, which again can happen, I would probably say San Diego State could be that team that falls under, just because like they did so good last year. And again, I don't know exactly their transfer ratio, how their recruits lined up and everything right now. I don't have that in front of me. I should, so that's on me. But just knowing that a team, when they're transferring over and they have that success, it's always going to be question marks. Can you continue? Can you grow and everything of that matter? And if they can build up to that stuff, then great. San Diego State, runs not necessarily rampant, but they're contending for another, title, or a Pac-12 title down the line. That's always going to be a great thing. It's just a matter of, can you piece it together? And they're one of the teams that could be really volatile.
Yeah,
in my eyes, at least.
Yeah, no, like I think I have to agree with you. Out of everybody, they're probably I don't want to say the most inflated win total, but it's probably the scariest one. Last year was a very fun year for Sean Lewis. So it was great to see their defense, become one of the top 10 units in the entire country. But Rob Orich left to take the job at Nebraska. Took a couple of players with him, Owen Chambliss. You do bring back a couple of guys that initially entered the portal, guys like Dale Sean Staley at safety, who's going to probably be an all-conference selection. Donald Latuli as well at linebacker. But especially defensively, I wouldn't be that surprised if there's a pretty noticeable drop just because of how dominant they were last year and how much of that was kind of because of the chemistry that they built up over the last couple of years under Orich. You think about that defensive line, guys like Trey White, Ryan Henderson, like there's a reason those guys got paid the way they got paid in the Power Four in the SEC, in the Big 12. Like they really produced, they were really developed in a good way, but that also takes time. So wouldn't surprise me if the defense does take a bit of a step back, but at the same time, offensively, you probably expect them to be a little bit better. I'm not the biggest Jaden Denigal fan just because he didn't put up the greatest film last year, but he could definitely take another step. Just kind of has to be a little more confident with throwing the ball down the field. That's probably the best way to put it. But you got a ton of talent in that wide receiver room. You got Lucky Sutton, who's one of the best running backs in the Pac-12. There's definitely a path to get to over 8 wins for San Diego State, but it definitely looks like a slim one.
Yeah, and like you were saying, there's tools around them. It's just I feel like this is always one of the conversations when it comes to Group of 6 schools, when it comes to either betting line or bowl game potential or any of that stuff. It's always like, hey, we have 3 different cores that are outstanding. But there's just one. There's just one. And you got to see how they kind of develop. And sadly, San Diego State is the question marks more of a quarterback stuff, which is a sadly continuous trend between the Mountain West and Pac-12 right now. But yeah, if they can develop the way that they can, and like realistically, I'm gonna pull their schedule real quick, just so I can go from there and take that up. Schedule. So they start FCS Portland State. That could be a win. UCLA is obviously gonna be a toughie. Ow.
I mean, New Mexico beat them in the Rose Bowl last year. I don't see why San Diego State couldn't.
That is true. And UCLA did have a pretty iffy sort of mix with it. So the only reason why I say that is because they're playing at UCLA. So that's why I'm like, ow, but we'll see. James Madison's right after that. They're thankfully at home for that. Toledo is right afterwards. And then some favorable, I mean, like I said earlier, but they play Colorado State away. They play Boise State at the end of the season is always a toughie, even though they have the flex game, but still. But you got favorable matchups against like Texas State at home, Fresno State at home, Washington State at home. So realistically, it's like the exact opposite of what Colorado State has in some ways. Obviously, still like good matchups with a crowd behind you, but they even trickle down towards the end of the season too. So it's just like if they can survive the Power 4 / like Group of 6 member that went to the CFP last year and get some decent wins. It's not unrealistic. It's just a matter of it's again like we talked about. It's very volatile, and if things work out, beautiful. If they don't, and you bet the over, you might be shaking a little bit at the sports book. And that's just the only way to put it. So, excuse me. So, but yeah, I think we kind of hit that on the nail pretty hard. So we'll go to the last mark of this, which is the Pac-12 or the rumors and conversations online of certain Pac-12 schools leaving for other conferences once like 2030 rolls around. So for those who haven't been like on social media seeing that stuff or anything, because even on my feed it kind of got skipped over occasionally, the basic rundown was, because conference realignment is always on everybody's minds. There's certain schools like Oregon State, I believe it was San Diego State and Boise State were some of the top ones mentioned, but as schools that could potentially leave next, because conference realignment always gets eyes. Realistically, obviously, this is not going to happen for a while. The Pac-12 has their media rights deal. They're going to continue with that for a while, and I believe into the next decade. And so it's just really a conversation of what's going to happen in the future, because obviously people will want programs to grow, and that's good. But I think it was at the Mountain West Media Days, but Gloria Navarra said like, "Hey, we're not actively looking for other programs. Obviously, if one kind of hits on our radar and they want to join and we want them to join, then we'll have those conversations." But I believe she kind of referenced, and this may be during your conversation or just on the State of the Mountain West address, more or less, it's like conference realignment happened. Let's pump the brakes a little bit, and I'm kind of in that same boat too.
Yeah, I definitely. I'd be all right if we have a little bit of a slow period for a couple of years here. You know, yeah, it was definitely a lot having to completely prep for three brand new teams coming into media days, but so hopefully there's not 5 more next year.
No, exactly. If that is the case, then we gotta build up our barracks at that point, because Jesus.
Yeah. We
but
need
yeah,
hope.
no, yeah. So, but no, I guess like the point of conversation there is like, obviously we both agree, but like, what would that kind of do to the college sports world, especially the mid-major world, if that does happen, give or take 5 years, where other programs start saying, "Hey, I want to move up again," or like, again, we could talk about this even in terms of the Mountain West with like UNLV moving to the Pac-12 or something of that matter too.
Yeah, you definitely feel like you've seen the phrase of lifeboats thrown out a lot of there's only so many lifeboats left to get into the Power Four. I don't know if it's that cut and dry, if they're literally like, okay, we have these 7 slots left, let's figure out who these are going to. Like it's a lot. There's a lot more ebb and flow to these kind of conference realignment situations than I think people give it credit for. And a lot of it, and I think there's a lot of like continuous conversations, like, like let's say somebody joins the Big 12 in 2032, they probably started drawing a paper in like 3 years before that. They probably started talking 5 years before that. Like it's these things are often discussed and not often acted upon. So that's kind of why like this new era has felt as weird as it has. But it there's a couple teams that feel like they're pretty well positioned if they were going to get into those quote unquote lifeboats. One thing I'm trying to include here is kind of like the fan attendance, for lack of a better word, just because like you've seen with schools like UCF getting in over USF, or a team like Memphis never getting the call up. There definitely is a lot of credence given to loyal fan bases that pack stadiums every night. So like that's the only reason I'm a little bit worried about San Diego State, just because Snapdragon's always been kind of a weird place to try and fill up. So like optically, I don't know if the Big 12, even if that's the other thing, if any of these teams go on like a crazy 3-4 year run, it doesn't matter where they are. Like, like let's say Nevada, wins 3 Mountain West championships in a row, they're gonna immediately be on realignment radar. Like that's just how it works nowadays. Like if you string a couple of good years together, like we've seen it with New Mexico already, they had
100%.
Yeah.
No, yeah, and that's what. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off if I did. But that's where like this is always the tricky part with video conference stuff. I wish we were in a studio. But what's it called? Yeah, it's just I think at the end of the day, like national brand matters, and with schools. Obviously not with football per se, but with schools like Oregon State, because baseball's been their bread and butter for God knows how long. Schools like, if they can get a better football program or more consistent football program, schools like Utah State, schools like what's it called, San Diego State and everything. That's where those kind of pop up. And even Boise State, even though they've been really good in football, they kind of had a down year last year in basketball, but still, like these are programs that generated so many units for the Mountain West or the Pac-12, whatever may have you, in so many different other sports. It's just getting the football aspect right. And if they can, then yeah, we'll have that. It sucks to say, but I truly do believe that the transfer portal era is not just for players, right? And it's not just for coaches either. Like you kind of alluded to, it's school does good for 3 years. Hey, I'm not getting paid what I want to get paid this
Mm.
for the next couple of years. I'm
Yeah.
going to go talk to the big brother about this one and go from there. And it's just like I wish it didn't happen because yes, money obviously has a factor in this stuff, but I wish there was also like sort of like a creed alliance or not creed like creed loyalty to it at the
Yeah.
same time because these are programs that again like for Nevada's sake they came from the West Coast Conference into the
Mm.
Mountain West. Obviously that was right after the Kaepernick era, so there was a lot of high hopes from that, but and they've been kind of up and down depending on the year,
Mm.
but like realistically, I don't see say Nevada does go on that 3 year run of like contending for conference championships, possibly being ranked or at least getting some votes here and there, and
Mm.
doing all that stuff and everything. I don't know what would happen in that matter, but if it would play out to where hey, we're going to join the Pac-12 now, UNLV come join us. We're finally the brothers are finally good enough to join the big boy club, or whether it be Boise State continues to do really well. Hey, boys, you get a call from the Pac-12 or excuse me, the Big 12, and get all this stuff here. It's not good for the ecosystem, and also it just hurts the players too. Because let's be real here, there's a reason why, in terms of travel and stuff, why NIU and NDSU, even though they're a really good school and a pretty mid-tier school in comparison, just over the last couple of years, um, there's a reason why people are like they're in the Mountain West. Okay, cool. Same with Sac State for the MAC. Same with even like UTEP and Texas State for their respective conferences now too. It's yes, they're closer, obviously, but still, there's still travel arrangements that need to be taken care of there, and that's still going to hurt the players because they're it's not a quick little 2 hour bus ride, you
Yeah.
know. So it's just we I I wish we didn't have to have this conversation. I wish
Yeah.
we didn't because at the end of the day, it just ruins the aspect of rivalries and college sports in general just for money.
Yeah, it's kind of like you remember as a kid when like you'd boot up like 2K or Madden and you do like a fantasy draft and like you'd
Yep.
have like a really fun 2 hours with your, putting LeBron and Michael Jordan on the Kings and it'd be really fun. But then you never play that save file again because there's the magic. The magic's not just not really there. So like I think there's definitely something to be said about like I'm not like the biggest like tradition guy in college football. Like I'm all for like changes and stuff, but there's especially with the rivalries and just kind of like the lack of any thought of regionality. Like it does suck, especially for from the fans' perspective of like I talked to a lot of guys at media days, like pretty much, especially those new teams coming into the Mountain West. Like pretty much every one of them is saying goodbye to a rivalry that they've played for the last 70 years. North Dakota State played South Dakota State every year since 1946, and they're not going to play each other. Like there's necessary. It's definitely necessary to a point because players always kind of had to get a cut of this pie at some point. That was the right thing to do in theory, and letting TV money in theory was kind of the right thing to do just to get more infrastructure around these schools and these teams and programs. But when it gets inflated to a point, it definitely does kind of lose its luster.
Yeah, and that's why when we talked about the Colorado State chances in the last segment, I was very happy to hear that they continued the Wyoming tradition. You
Mm.
know, because like that's a huge rivalry for both schools. And even if it's the first game of the season or if it's the last game of the season, they're still going to be happy to play that rivalry game. You know, it's the same thing with like if you ever do those like college football dynasties on the
Mm.
video game and everything, you can have protected opponents, and if you do protected opponents for Nevada, even if you don't, I think sometimes too, they will still routinely schedule UNLV. Even
Mm.
if like I've sent Nevada to the Big Ten because I play on rookie sometimes. I just want to inflate my numbers.
Mm.
And so like I'm just like, hey, I want to feel good and throw the ball a bunch. But like even on like an actual dynasty, if I change Nevada to the Big 12, the Big 10 or whatever, I always want to make sure that UNLV is on my schedule because that's important in my mind to the ecosystem of Nevada.
Mm.
And so it's it's always tricky when this conversation comes up because, like you were alluding to, it's important for players to get paid. It's important for teams to get paid because how criminally historically low some of them got paid or didn't get paid until like 4 or 5 years ago
Mhm.
is is an injustice. But I think it's the overcorrection of it has been taking place, and it's just there's almost no wiggle room to bring those schools back. Like if we
Yeah,
could have not like a rebuilt Pac-12, but if we could have schools like Stanford play in the Pac-12 again, I think that'd be a lot of fun because that could at least continue a tradition of a California rivalry for so many other schools.
yeah. It's there's there's definitely a universe where this all ended up a little more regionally palatable. I feel like
Yeah,
just to kind of ring work back to our original question. I
yeah,
No, you're good. I completely forgot about it. But the one team that I think probably is a little under the radar and has a pretty decent chance of maybe making a jump to the Big 12, I think actually would be Colorado State. It's definitely a weird one because they would have to get their football program in order, which has been tough to do over the last few years. Basketball, not worried about. They've been great under Nico Medved. Even Farouk Namesh is keeping them at pretty much the same exact level, so they're going to be fine. Financially and market wise, they're great. Um, they're in that same state with Colorado. You already kind of have a partner, which is kind of one of the only reasons that you know whenever UNLV and Nevada kind of get brought up seriously into discussions, I always kind of, raise an eyebrow just because like the state has been very clear that they're a package deal for years. And I just don't know. It seems like people forget about that a lot. Um, but Colorado State, I think like if there's a world where they have a very successful 5 years on the football field, Canvas Stadium is packed every night. Maybe they beat Colorado once or and maybe they're able to schedule Colorado once or twice during the stretch and beat them, kind of show that they belong. I don't think it's out of the question that that could happen. And, that probably applies to Utah State too, with their rivalry with Utah, their incredible basketball program. They're a couple of great football years away from being one of, if not the most attractive candidate in realignment.
yeah. And that's where I always think of like with Boise, with Oregon State, like both of them just have so much historical precedent in
Mm-hmm.
just a variety of different sports, and that's where I think, like again, if they build up football, Utah State and Colorado State will definitely be on people's radar. I just think for the now because college football just makes so much more money and they do so much more with it now, and that it's
Mm-hmm.
basically the focal point of so many other programs. Like I remember correctly, if I remember correctly, I found it on Twitter and I can't find the post. I wanted to. I'd look for like an hour before the podcast. But someone broke down Penn State's budget and how they spent and how they earned every year, I think it was like last year or 2 years ago, and I think football accounted for somewhere in the nine figures in revenue,
Mm-hmm.
and they just broke even because of that. And so
Yeah.
it's like you're gonna have so much precedent put on football for the conference realignment, and that's
Mm-hmm.
where like Boise State kind of takes it. If Texas State continues with Brad, I almost said Johnson, Brad Jackson, Jesus. It's not as late in the West Coast, but still. Um, but if Texas State pops up, that could be a conversational point too,
Mm-hmm.
because then you have Texas and you have other Power Four schools that they can at least maybe contend with, not in the same football, but in other programs. You have Oregon State again. I think baseball just because that's been on top of my mind recently. Like Oregon State could do something too if they can have like a good couple bowl game years too. And so it's just again, it sucks that we're having the conversation, but it just makes sense nationally for how college sports has been going on. And so,
Mm-hmm.
unless someone decides to like break off the what's it called, the timeline, and we go down a different path, that's kind of just what
Yeah.
we're living in right now. Which I wish it didn't because I'm very like not necessarily traditionalist, but I like change with certain programs. But
Mhm.
my biggest thing is always I want to go play UNLV once every year.
Yeah.
Same with probably UNLV and with New Mexico and their rivals. Now they're probably going to do something with NDSU.
Mm-hmm.
That's Wyoming and Colorado State. So it's just I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm hopeful good things will happen, but at the end of the day, we're journalists. We'll see what happens. We'll write about it.
Yeah. Whatever happens, we'll have to cover it. So, oh well.
Amen to that. Yeah. So, but yeah, so I think that's a good way to end it. I appreciate you coming on the podcast, Jack. Thank you so much again. I hope you had a good time on the podcast. Any last words before we head off?
No, thank you for having me, Derek. I had a great time, man. Really excited to have the Pac-Mountain Pulse out there for the people ready to enjoy. I know you got big plans coming up and a lot of fun conversations coming down the pipeline. So I'm really excited for you. On my end, if you guys haven't already, check out the Jack Talk CFB YouTube channel just to look at all the full interviews from Mountain West Media Days that we've dropped. All the players are out now. The coaches will be coming this week. Gloria Navarez will be out the week after that. And yeah. Oh, also, if you guys want to look at any projected depth charts for the 2026 season, the Mountain West Pac-12 depth chart tracker app, the link should be on, I don't know. It's in my Twitter. You guys can find it. But that has projected depth charts for every Mountain West and Pac-12 team, every rostered player. It's like 1,800 players or so. Working on getting stats for everybody. I think all the Mountain West teams have all their stats done. Pac-12 a little behind, but we'll get to that. Yeah, that's all I got.
Appreciate that, Jack. And yes, go check out that tracker app because that thing is sick. He put so much time into it too. And I remember like seeing it. I think when you were like 25% done with like stats and input and stuff and histories about players and stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember just seeing it and I'm just like, holy crap, dude. This is sick. Like,
yeah.
No, it's so cool, dude. I'm so happy we have it, dude. I'm so happy. So thank you again.
No worries. Nah, thank you for having me, man. Really appreciate it.
Of course, brother. Thank you. So, well, everybody, this was the end of episode 2 of Pac-Mountain Pulse. I hope you all enjoyed. Feel free to find all of our content and all of our stuff. Actually, it's beautiful timing. It's on the ticker right below me at Mountain West Conference Connection on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, or on mountainwestconferenceconnection.com. That's all of our stuff right there. You'll see my content. You'll see Jack's content. You'll see all of our content there. So feel free to go check it out there. I appreciate you all joining us once again, and we'll see y'all next week on Pac-Mountain Pulse. Take care, everybody.
Have a good one, guys.